says how to extinguish conditioned responses. We can, however, extinguish the conditioned response if we make a practice of relaxing instead of responding. We can, if we wish, just as in the case of the telephone, learn to ignore the bell and continue to sit quietly and let it ring. A key thought that we can carry with us to use whenever we're confronted by any disturbing stimulus is to say to ourselves, the telephone is ringing, but I don't have to answer it. I can just let it ring. This thought will key into your mental picture of yourself sitting quietly, relaxed, unresponding, doing nothing, letting the telephone ring unheeded, and will act as a trigger or clue to call up the same attitude that you had when letting the telephone ring. So that's basically the little mental trick that you were just talking about whenever you're in traffic or, whatever it is causing you any anguish. Someone says something about you, bumps into you, you might start to, maybe think of overreacting, but just remember, you don't have to react. And it says, if you cannot ignore the response, delay it. In the process of extinguishing a condition, a person may find it difficult, especially at first, to totally ignore the bell, especially if it rung unexpectedly. In such instances, you can accomplish the same final result, extinction of the conditioning, by delaying your response. Mary S. became anxious and ill at ease in the presence of crowds. She was able, by practicing the foregoing technique, to immunize or tranquilize herself against the disturbing stimuli on most occasions. However, occasionally the desire to run away, to flee, became almost overpowering. Remember Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind? I asked her. Her philosophy was simple. I can't think about that right now. If I do, I'll go crazy. I'll think about that tomorrow. She was able to maintain her inner equilibrium and effectively cope with her environment in spite of war, fire, pestilence, and unrequited love by delaying the response. Delaying the response breaks up and interferes with the automatic workings of conditioning. Counting to 10 when you are tempted to become angry is based on the same principle and is very good advice. If you count slowly and in fact actually delay the response rather than merely holding in your angry shouting or desk pounding, the response in anger consists of more than shouting or desk beating. The tension in your muscles is a response. You cannot feel the emotion of anger or fear if your muscles remain perfectly relaxed. Therefore, if you can delay feeling angry for 10 seconds, delay responding at all, you can extinguish the automatic reflex. And the little blurb here says, the positive effects of counting to 10 when you are tempted to be angry, the 10-second delay, can also be greatly enhanced by inhaling and exhaling deeply while paying attention to the breath. 3 inhales and exhale is easy enough to take a step back and create the space to approach the situation differently. Mary S. did extinguish her conditioned fear of crowds. Go ahead. Yeah, Wim Hof's method too, all that stuff. Yeah. Okay, so we got Mary S. extinguishes her conditioned fear of crowds by delaying her response. When she felt that she simply had to run away, she would say to herself, very well, but not this very minute. I will delay leaving the room for 2 minutes. I can refuse to obey for only 2 minutes. Okay. And I have the next section here that I got highlighted. It says, build yourself a quiet room in your mind. And this is where you guys really, really pay attention, because this is like the mental trick that you need to remember for detaching yourself from, something that's happening to you in the moment. It says, men seek retreats for themselves, houses in the country, seashores and mountains, and thou too art wont to desire such things very much, said Marcus Aurelius. But this is altogether a mark of the most common sort of men, for it is in thy power whenever thou shalt choose to retire into thyself. For nowhere, either with more quiet or more freedom from trouble, does a man retire than into his own soul, particularly when he has within him such thoughts that by looking into them, he is immediately in perfect tranquility. And I affirm that tranquility is nothing else than the good ordering of the mind. Constantly, then give thyself this retreat and renew thyself. During the last days of World War II, someone commented to President Harry Truman that he appeared to bear up under the stress and strain of the presidency better than any previous president, that the job did not appear to have aged him or sapped his vitality, and that this was rather remarkable, especially in the view of many problems that confronted him as a wartime president. His answer was, I have a foxhole in my mind. He went on to say that just as a soldier retreated into his foxhole for protection, rest, and recuperation, he periodically retired into his own mental foxhole where he allowed nothing to bother him. And the next session goes on to say, your own decompression chamber. Each person needs a quiet room inside his own mind, a quiet center within him, like the deep of the ocean that is never disturbed, no matter how rough the waves may become on the surface. This quiet room within, which is built in imagination, works as a mental and emotional decompression chamber. It depressurizes you from tensions, worry, pressures, stresses, and strains, refreshes you, and enables you to return to your workday or your workaday world better prepared to cope with it. It is my belief that each personality does already have a quiet center within, which is never disturbed and is unmoved, like the mathematical point in the very center of a wheel or axle that remains stationary. What we need to do is find this quiet center within us and retreat into it periodically for rest, recuperation, and renewed vigor. One of the most beneficial prescriptions that I have ever given patients is the advice to learn to return to this quiet, tranquil center. And one of the best ways that I have found for entering this quiet center is to build for yourself in imagination a little mental room. Furnish this room with whatever is the most restful and refreshing to you, perhaps beautiful landscapes. If you like paintings, the volume of your favorite verse. If you like poetry, the colors of the walls are your own favorite pleasant colors, but should be chosen from the restful hues of blue, light green, yellow, gold. The room is plainly and simply furnished. There are no distracting elements. It is very neat and everything is in order. Simplicity, quietness, beauty are the keystones. It contains your favorite easy chair. From one small window, you can look out and see a beautiful beach. The waves roll upon the beach and retreat, but you cannot hear them, for your room is very, very quiet. Take as much care in building this room in your imagination as you would in building an actual room. Be thoroughly familiar with every detail. So that right there is one of the nuggets of the book. When we say the power of imagination and being very vivid, and I mean to the point where you can recall details as if this was a real place. Like if someone asked you, what does this room look like in your head? You have to be able to describe it like the physical space that you're in right now. That's the key to all of this. If it's not that vivid in your imagination, if you cannot picture it, it will not elicit the emotions you need it to. The point is you're trying to relax. The emotional feeling of like security, stability, safety that you get from that room, you can only mimic when you've used the imagination to the point where you've convinced your brain that there is no difference, that you technically are in that room mentally. There's no difference physically. Remember, the story from where you walk down the trail and you see what looks like a bear in the bushes, and immediately your body goes into fight or flight. That's because you saw a bear. The process of just thinking, imagining that was a bear automatically spikes up everything, adrenaline, blood pressure, everything's getting flooded into your muscles, all the nutrients, everything. You're ready for the fight or flight response. And then you take a second look and it was just the bushes rustling in the wind and a shadow oddly shaped. And then again, you begin to relax immediately. It just washes over you like a sigh of relief. All that is mental picture. It's imagination, guys. You imagined a bear. You had a physical response in your body. This is the power. Now you need to take some time and build this safe room in your mind so that you can call upon it wherever you are. Because the power is it's in your mind, so you can take this anywhere. It's not like you need to build a place in your house and you only have access to it there, and you may get into an encounter at work or out in public or something. You need to go home to retreat to this place and unwind at the end of the day. No, with this technique, you can unwind anywhere at any time whenever you need it. That's the key here. Okay, this is a way for stress management. We deal with shit from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed. Your day is difficult. It starts off with problems, maybe deadlines, maybe obstacles in the way, maybe bad news. Something's happening with family, the wife, the girlfriend, the whatever. It's not going well. You feel like shit. You're coming down with a cold, whatever. Do you have that mental imagery, that little lockbox in your head that you could retreat to, your safe place that can calm you down and help you think clearly and solve problems efficiently throughout your day? If you don't, you're missing out on a major, major key of how to help right the ship when the waves are getting rough on you. The waves of life. Don't take this one for granted, guys. If there's one of the few ones that you need to pick up from this book is that mental safe space. You have to build it in your head, because this is one of the ones that you're going to use until you're dead, till your very last breath, because it has utility forever. Forever you will need a mental space like this to retreat to. And it says, clear your mechanism before undertaking a new problem. Okay, so this is for the guys that are trying to start a bunch of new things all the time. And what ends up happening with them is they bring their previous problems along into their journey. So then it weighs them down, it drags them, and they keep accumulating these issues. And they try to bury them under the surface as they attempt new things. It's never forgotten. So he says here, if you're using an adding machine or a computer, you must clear the machine of the previous problem before undertaking a new one. Otherwise, parts of the old problem or the old situation carry over into the new situation and give you a wrong answer. This exercise of retiring for a few moments into your quiet room in your mind can accomplish the same sort of clearance of your success mechanism. And for that reason, it is very helpful to practice it in between tasks, situations, and environments that require different moods, mental adjustments, or mental sets. Common examples of carryover or failure to clear your mental machinery are the following. A business executive carries his workday worries and his workday mood home with him. All day he has been harried, hurried, aggressive, and set to go. Perhaps he has felt a bit of frustration, which tends to make him irritable. He stops working physically when he goes home, but he carries with him a residue of his aggressiveness, frustration, hurry, and worry. He is still set to go and cannot relax. He is irritable with his wife and family. He keeps thinking about problems at the office, and although there is nothing he can do about them. So bringing your problems from work at home, everybody knows they try to naturally separate work-life balance. Work is work. Home is home, but people always carry over problems. They never clear their memory in their head. They don't do the safe space reset to breathe, do the little breathing, go to your safe place, turn the key, walk into a house refreshed. Instead, you're coming in with the same exact mood, that residue from work, the hyper competitive environment, the aggressive asshole colleagues you have, the whatever deal that didn't close properly, the stress, the blah, 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 anxiety, shit, deadlines, whatever it is at work, you're bringing that at home and you're destroying your family. A lot of men need to understand that this is one of the things, like mental mastery is not just for you. It is for your family as well. And it says, for those that are struggling with sleep, insomnia and rudeness are often emotional carryovers. Many people carry their troubles to bed with them when they should be resting. Mentally and emotionally, they're still trying to do something about a situation at a time when doing nothing or doing is not in order. All during the day, we have the need of many different types of emotional and mental organization. You need a different mood and mental organization for talking with your boss and talking with a customer. If you have just talked with an irate and irritable customer, you need a change in set before talking with a second customer. Otherwise, emotional carryover from this one situation will be inappropriate in dealing with the other. One large company found that their executives unknowingly answered the telephone in a harsh, angry, hostile tone. The phone rang in the midst of a knockdown, drag-out conference, or while the executive was enmeshed in frustration and hostility for one reason or another, and his angry, hostile tone of voice surprised and offended the innocent caller. The company directed all executives to pause 5 seconds, smile before picking up the phone. Then he has another section. I won't read it though, but he says emotional carryover causes accidents. Think road rage. You lose any ability of rational processing when you get behind the wheel angry as fuck. You'll tend to run red lights. You'll drive and speed everywhere. You'll aggressively switch lanes. You won't look in the mirror. You make a bunch of stupid decisions with very little thought, and then an accident happens. That's emotional carryover. For example, you just had an argument with your girlfriend, and then you peel out of the car in the driveway and you're out angry. How many guys have done that? Bad argument with your woman, and then you're just peeling out the driveway with the car, just blasting it twice the speed limit. Okay. And he has one here that says, stop fighting straw men. Still another type of inappropriate response that causes worry. Insecurity and tension is the bad habit of trying to respond emotionally to something that doesn't exist in our imaginations. Not satisfied with over-responding to actual minor stimuli in the actual environment, many of us create straw men in our imaginations. So pay attention, because almost everybody does this, including myself, and you have to manually go into your brain and stop this useless thought process that's taking up your time. And again, remember, Not satisfied with over responding to actual minor stimuli in the actual environment, many of us create straw men in our imaginations and emotionally respond to our own mental pictures. In addition to those negatives that actually exist in the environment, we impose our own negatives. This or that may happen. What if such and such happens? When we worry, we form mental pictures, okay? Like the opposite of the quiet room. When you're negative and you make negative pictures, you're going to have negative emotional responses. And it says adverse mental pictures of what may exist in the environment, of what may happen, okay? It says when we respond to these negative pictures as if they are present reality, or where was I at? Oh, let me start from here. When we worry, we form mental pictures, adverse mental pictures of what may exist in the environment, of what may happen. We then respond to these negative pictures as if they are present reality. Remember, your nervous system cannot tell the difference between a real experience and one that is vividly imagined. So key in on that last sentence right there. Your nervous system, just like the fight or flight, it can't tell between the imagined and the real. This should be like an earth-shattering thing for a lot of people to realize. The fact that you can trick yourself on such a deep level and elicit a physiological response out of your body simply from imagining things. It has the same exact power as the real physical world. Okay, so if we extrapolate that outward, what do you guys think happens when you're going down that thought tree of negative emotions? Like, I can't do this. What if I get laughed at? I'm not capable. What if they say something and I look stupid? When you're building the mental picture of you failing in your mind, you're imagining, because as you're thinking those thoughts, you're imagining what it's like going up to that person, the girl or your boss, and asking for your raise or whatever it is that you do with a negative set emotion. And you've convinced yourself as if it's real. You've lived through potentially a traumatic event twice, 3 times in your head before you've even done it once in the real world. And some guys are honestly shocked when they, for example, we'll use dating, when they talk to a pretty girl that they're just intimidated by and she actually says yes for a date. But in your head, you've thought up 50 different negative scenarios of how you're going to get absolutely humiliated and disrespected. And you've given yourself this emotional trauma that you've self-implanted, and it's not even the real world. And it might have screwed you up to even go and approach her in the first place, because now you're nervous, now you're shaking, now you're sweating, now you're stuttering like an idiot, simply because you've imagined all the ways it could go wrong instead of being positive and thinking all the ways it could have gone right. Imagine if you thought the correct way of this is going to go well, she's going to like me. If she doesn't, that's fine, but I'm going to go kill it. I'm smooth 007 James Bond shit and have an infinite charisma, and she's about to be swept off her feet. Imagine how confidently, how differently you would approach it. You wouldn't be sweating. You wouldn't sound like a bumbling fool. Already in your mind, the deal was closed. And so in the physical world, you embody that. That's one way to think of it. And then we got here something that says, next section, doing nothing is the proper response to an unreal problem. Again, you can tranquilize yourself against this sort of disturbance, not by something you do, but by something you don't do. Your refusal to respond. As far as your emotions are concerned, the proper response to worry pictures is to totally ignore them. Live emotionally in the present moment. Analyze your environment. Become more aware of what actually exists in your environment and respond and react spontaneously to that. In order to do this, you must give all your attention to what is happening now. You must keep your eye on the ball. Then your response will be appropriate and you will have no time to notice or respond to a fictitious environment. Guys mostly do this when they're either living in the past or the present. And mostly the future the future or the past. The future is the most dangerous one because it hasn't happened yet. So your brain can use its imagination to go off in extreme examples of what the potential outcome could be. And you can get lost in a rabbit hole of your mind, just absolutely running out of control. You quickly lose sight of whatever it is you're originally intending to do because now you're catastrophizing whatever it is. Say you're going for a job application and you might be a little bit nervous, but then you imagine how the interview will be like in the future and you completely bomb and you answer it wrong and the managers are laughing in your face and it's completely unrealistic, but your brain is running out of control from right up under you. You have to completely stop it in the moment right then and there and say, this is irrational. This isn't even true. It's simply an interview between me and the manager. They're already interested. They brought me in for the interview. Calm down. Just imagine the questions they'll ask and imagine myself answering them properly. So you could practice with your imagination the interview you're about to go through. You can practice the basics, like what do you bring to the company? What experience do you have? What companies have you worked for and positions you held? Practice the basics you know that they're going to ask you and you'll be fine, you know? Instead of imagining them laughing at you, making fun of you, bombing the whole interview, whatever stupid shit you could possibly imagine, like your pants falling down as you walk in the door, like your brain could go in such extremes to make you feel like it's an impossible task. And therefore, by the time you show up to the interview, you're fucking so nervous, so stiff. And how many people have gotten a job interviews? I remember when I was young, and I used to go, some of my first job interviews, I was a nervous wreck, dude. I didn't know if they would like me. I didn't know if the manager was even going to be interested in hiring me. I didn't feel like I was worth, hiring and working for this company. And I felt so much anxiety and shit by the time I went into the interview place. If my friend didn't give me a good, word with the manager, I probably wouldn't have got that job. And this was early in like my high school when I was getting my, work release job. And so I was freaking myself out for nothing. The manager was like, yeah, you were a bit nervous and stiff, I could tell. He's like, but you seem like a good kid and your friend put in a good word, so we're going to hire you. So, imagine, but there's so many people in other jobs that I've worked at, and I've had to hire people too myself, and I could see that they come in stiff, worried, anxious. And the difference between that person and the other guy that comes in or woman that's just super relaxed, like shakes your hand, talks to you like they've known you for decades and conversation flows. And because a lot of times these people, they're also hiring for your energy just in the work environment itself. Like if you're good in terms of personality and we can get along, I'll overlook maybe some of your shortcomings in whatever your resume says, as opposed to the dude that may be super qualified in this way, but Jesus Christ, like he can hardly get a word out without mumbling. Like sometimes the workplace energy, then the environment has to be good because teamwork matters the most. Overall, if you can't work well together, if you can't communicate, sometimes that'll be enough to not get you the job, whether you're more qualified than the other candidate or not. And again, all this comes out in the interview when you're extremely nervous. And that guy that's, by the way, bumbling and shit could be the most talkative motherfucker you can possibly know when he's around his friends that he's comfortable with, when he's not doing that thing in his brain of holding himself back, imagining the worst case scenario. When you're out with your friends that you trust and you've known for years, you don't imagine scenarios when you knock on his door to go see him and, hey, let's go grab a beer or whatever it is. You don't imagine what it's like when you see him after a few days or what he's going to say when you sit down and grab a fucking drink out of the fridge. It just comes naturally. Like whatever happens in a moment will happen. Your brain doesn't even care to process what would happen, what ifs like that because of how comfortable you are. It doesn't represent a threat. If you can try to go to that safe room in your head before an event like applying for a job, you can enter that room as calm, as relaxed as you would be when you're talking to your best friend. And that would make all the difference. Okay. This is all about controlling the imagination because it's the imagination that gets us all into trouble because our imagination is what elicits the emotional responses. And you can choose to have positive ones or negative ones. That's it, dude. That's basically the book. All right. And he has something here called the first aid kit. And he says, carry these thoughts with you as a sort of a first aid kit. For inner disturbance, or opposite of tranquility, is nearly always caused by over-response, a too sensitive alarm reaction. You create a built-in tranquilizer or psychic screen between yourself and the disturbing stimulus when you practice not responding, aka letting the telephone ring. Next point is you cure old habits of over-response. You extinguish old conditioned reflexes when you practice delaying the habitual, automatic, and unthinking response. Point 3 is relaxation is nature's own tranquilizer. Relaxation is non-response. Learn physical relaxation by daily practice. Then, when you need to practice non-response in daily activities, just do what you're doing when you relax. Another point is use the quiet room in your mind technique, both as a daily tranquilizer to tone down nervous response and to clear your emotional mechanism of carryover emotions that would be inappropriate in a new situation. And the last one is stop scaring yourself to death with your own mental pictures. Stop fighting straw men. Emotionally respond only to what actually is here and now and ignore the rest. And then it says your spiritual thermostat. I thought this was another really good section here. It says your physical body has a built-in thermostat, itself a servo mechanism that maintains your inner physical temperature at a steady 98.6 degrees, regardless of the temperature in the environment. The weather around you may be freezing cold or 110 degrees, yet your body maintains its own climate, a steady 98.6. It is able to function properly in the environment because it does not take on itself the climate of the environment. Cold or hot, it maintains its own. You also have a built-in spiritual thermostat that enables you to maintain an emotional climate and atmosphere in spite of the emotional weather around you. Many people do not use this spiritual thermostat because they do not know it's there. They do not know such a thing is possible, and they do not understand that they do not have to take on the outward climate. Yet your spiritual thermostat is just as necessary for emotional health and well-being as your physical thermostat is for physical health. Begin using it now by practicing the techniques in this chapter. And he goes into the techniques like the room, like delaying the responses, basically the first aid kit that he gives you before. So maybe that's a better concept for people. That's the end of the chapter, so we can speak freely here, but maybe that's a better concept for people, that you have a thermostat that not only regulates physically your body, but mentally, and you can build this thermostat. That's one way you could imagine all this. So imagine yourself, man, if you could picture a little thermostat in your head and somebody's maybe yelling at your face, or someone's honking their car in traffic, or whatever it is that's causing a potential reaction out of you. Imagine that these outside forces are beginning to affect your inner thermostat, and you can choose to turn that off and just keep it steady. Just imagine that. I like to picture my safe space that I like to picture when I go into some stressful situations is the feeling I've gotten from deprivation chambers, which is basically I'm in a pitch black room and I'm floating in water and I hear absolutely nothing. So I imagine myself at the depths of the ocean where I feel weightless and all I can hear in between my ears is nothing. It's just a deafening sound of like when water's in your ears when you go swim underwater. And that's it. That's all I hear. Everything else is completely silent. And that's my little safe room that I built. For me, it's super simple. I don't build out what he said, like look out the window and all this stuff. I imagine a state of being where I'm floating in the deprivation tank, and that's all I'm experiencing is just thoughts. I feel nothing. I become like weightless in a sense, in the purest like physical form. I feel no sensations whatsoever. It's just your brain
It's
power.
interesting
Yeah.
that you say that because I've never been able to. I've kind of done that same thing my whole life, not really thinking about it, but it's almost like a detachment.
hmm
In
Yeah,
the
that's what it
present
is. Yeah.
moment, you're still there, but you're detached.
Yeah.
So Micah does that when he goes on his swings. That's where he I think Micah you get your clarity. When I went to before I went to Asia for a couple of years, I had an anxiety about becoming an expat and leaving everything I owned and selling everything. So before I left, I recognized I had some of this anxiety. I needed to treat it, or maybe I might sabotage myself or get too homesick. So there's a beautiful tree by my house. It was the largest tree in our whole county. I didn't know that. It's a giant pine, and I loved it. I loved it. It was just an immortal tree. And so I'd sit on my couch and I'd look at that tree through my window, and I imagined I was in Asia, remembering the age and the size and the grandeur and the peace that I felt when I'd look at this tree. And I thought of that tree many times when I was in Thailand and Malaysia, Singapore, and China, and all that. And whenever I'd feel a little too lost or a little too chaotic, I could be on the bus, I could be anywhere, and I would just for 30 seconds remember the peace of the tree and the quiet of my apartment and the beauty and safety of all that, and then I'd feel refreshed. Is anyone else have those safe spaces? Like, I know it's kind of a silly term, but
Uh, I
tranquility zones.
yeah, yeah, I
Mental
do.
retreats.
And but yeah, my in my case is the beach house that we have here at home. And there's a space when it was redecorated, the area where let me see, the lobby would be where you can see the ocean clearly. And I always think of it, and whenever I see it in the day, clear the waves moving, and the room is actually pretty quiet except for the air conditioning, but it is a very, very relaxing experience. The room is wide with the blue chairs, and yeah, I always retreat there when I read this chapter. That's the spot that came to mind, and it was easy for me to imagine because it actually exists. So I don't have to do a lot of mental work to do it. And one thing that I did notice is that when I start relaxing, whatever I'm waiting for, like it suddenly pops up. And I guess in a way it disturbs the peace. So I don't know, when I had to wait in line for something, for a copy
Exactly.
that I
Yeah.
had to say.
hmm
Yeah, it happened to me 3 times at the same day. And I was at the same and I was like, what the hell? I
Yeah.
can't even start to like zone out to relax and wait in peace. But at least it was good. How do you say? At least I'm grateful that I was starting to do that because it was relieving me of the impatience that it would
hmm
build up for waiting whatever it was.
So that, guys, that's called utilization, like in neuro linguistic programming and hypnosis. That's like an organic utilization. So we have these places that you can either create synthetically, like it says in psychocybernetics, and or you can use an organic one that you have in your life, that your childhood, different moment in your life, because those are a little easier to work with for most
Yeah.
of the people. You may even feel good in your car when you park it in the garage, just sitting there calming yourself before you make an energy change, or in the shower, some little spot where you have a natural freedom and you kind of indulge in it, but you don't notice it. You have a few of those, so you could piggyback on one of those and then use that as your imaginary tool.
Yep.